Father Miguel began the final blessing. A crack. The oil lantern toppled onto the wooden floor. Oil gushed out. Fire swallowed the altar cloth and leapt to the roof timbers. The ancient beams roared into flame. Guests in their finest suits and dresses screamed and surged toward the door.
Elena! She's playing behind the altar.
2 guests pinned his arms. The chapel's roof was a sheet of fire. Susan fell to her knees in the dust, her wedding dress smeared black. The bell tower rang out near the gate. The gelding Bravo yanked against his tether, eyes white with terror. The rope snapped. Bravo bolted, not away, but straight toward the blazing doorway. He didn't hesitate. Flames engulfed his mane as he disappeared into the inferno. Scott sank to the ground. The chapel groaned like a dying beast. Bravo had vanished into the smoke. The plaza fell into a dreadful silence. Smoke poured from the doorway, black and oily, blotting out the sun. Then a shape staggered through the flames. Bravo, the gelding, his coat steaming, his mane a crown of fire slung across his withers. A white altar-runner bundle, its edges blackened and curling, a small form stirring inside. Scott tore free of the restraining arms and ran. The heat hit his face like a blow, but he didn't stop. He grabbed the bundle with trembling hands and pulled back the scorched cloth.
Elena, baby girl, can you hear me?
A tiny, soot-smeared face emerged. Elena blinked, coughed, and let out a thin wail.
She's alive. Oh, thank God. She's alive.
Susan stumbled to them, her wedding gown torn and blackened, and gathered the child into her arms. Then the chapel groaned, a deep, splintering roar, and collapsed entirely, shooting flames and sparks into the sky. The embers still glowed red as the village doctor knelt beside Elena beneath a mesquite tree. Sheriff Moreno rode into the plaza. His horse lathered, his face set hard as the smoke.
Sheriff, that lantern was new. The base was solid iron. It could not have simply fallen.
The sheriff knelt by the smoldering doorway and lifted a twisted metal bracket from the ash.
The pins were filed down. This fire was set.
A farmer in a soot-stained wedding suit stepped forward, nervously twisting his hat. He had seen a dark-haired man in a tailored suit, bending over the lantern just before the ceremony began. Luis Herrera pushed through the crowd, his face a careful mask of shock and relief.
Thank God you all survived. I heard the commotion and came as fast as I could.
His eyes flicked toward the child, then away too quickly. That night, in their small adobe kitchen, Scott and Susan sat across a rough wooden table. A single candle flickered between them. Elena slept fitfully in the next room.
There's something you need to know about Maria's will. The inheritance she left for Elena. If anything happened to our daughter, it would all go to Luis.
He unfolded the yellow document and read the clause aloud. In the event of Elena Maria Reyes' death, the entire estate shall pass to my brother, Luis Herrera.
Luis? He would inherit everything if Elena, God, Scott, and he was at the chapel today, standing right near the altar before the ceremony.
A sharp knock on the door broke the silence. Sheriff Moreno stepped inside, his hat in his hands, soot still streaking his uniform.
I examined the lantern base. The pins were filed clean through. It was no accident, Scott. Someone wanted that fire to spread.
Then he tried to kill my daughter. For money. He wanted Elena dead so he could claim her inheritance.
Susan began to cry, silent tears cutting tracks through the soot on her cheeks.
I have no proof. Not yet. But I will not let him escape.
Outside, the chapel ruins smoldered under a cold moon. The investigation had only just begun. By sunrise, Sheriff Moreno set up a table near the charred chapel and began taking statements. A boy of 10, still in his Sunday best, tugged the sheriff's sleeve. He had seen the man at the lantern. The boy described dark hair, a thin mustache, and a tailored suit. The sketch artist's pencil brought Luis Herrera's face to the page.
I was only lighting the votive candles, as I do before every mass. Ask anyone.
But before the sheriff could press, a woman pointed toward the cantina. What about Ramon? He swore he'd ruined Scott. Ramon Vargas was dragged from the cantina, reeking of mezcal. His eyes were wild with drink and anger. He screamed curses at Scott, but two men swore he'd been drinking inside the cantina since noon. He had never left.
It's all smoke and mirrors. Luis will slip away while they chase a drunk.
By noon, Sheriff Moreno closed his notebook. 2 suspects, 0 evidence. The case had stalled before it began. That night, Scott held Elena beneath the mesquite tree. The man he'd called a brother had tried to burn her alive. Scott sifted through the cold ash where the altar had stood. His fingers closed on fabric, the corner of a scorched handkerchief. He lifted it into the morning light. Embroidered initials, still legible among the burns. LH. That afternoon, the wake for the chapel was held in the village hall. Luis stood near the back, his expression carefully controlled. Scott caught his arm and pulled him into the pantry. The door latched behind them.
I found this where the lantern fell. Your initials, Luis.
That is not mine. Anyone could have planted it. If you destroy my good name, I'll make sure the inheritance is tied up for years. Elena will see nothing.
He's threatening a child to cover his crime.
Luis smoothed his cuffs and walked back into the wake, his mask of sorrow perfectly reapplied. Scott stood alone among the sacks of flour, the handkerchief burning in his fist. Scott slipped back into the wake just as Father Miguel raised his hands for the closing prayer.
Let us pray for the soul of this sacred place, and for the little souls spared by a miracle.
Before the amens could fade, the hall doors swung open. Sheriff Moreno strode in with 2 deputies, a paper held high.
Luis Herrera, I have a warrant to search your room above the cantina. The child's testimony and this handkerchief gave us cause.
This is an outrage. You are shaming me before the whole village without a shred of real proof.
The deputies brushed past him without a word. Luis's polished composure cracked for a single breath. Susan, standing at the back, saw his hand tremble as he gripped his glass of wine.
He's scared. The truth is buried in that room.
The hall erupted with whispers. Outside, heavy boots clattered up the wooden stairs of the cantina. The search for evidence had begun. But what it would uncover would shatter the last bonds of family in that valley. The deputies descended the cantina stairs, carrying a small oil can and a worn leather diary. The room went deathly quiet.
This was under your bed. It still smells of lantern fuel.
He opened the diary, found a page marked with a pressed desert flower, and read aloud, "Tonight the child she loves will be gone by fire. The inheritance will fall to me. Signed LH."
Lies. All lies. You are destroying an innocent man to cover your own debts.
Luis threw himself toward the door, knocking over a candelabra. 2 deputies caught him and drove him hard onto the splintering floorboards. The crowd recoiled. The sheriff pulled handcuffs from his belt, the metal glinting in the lantern light. The cuffs snapped around Luis's wrists. A woman sobbed. Scott stood frozen, his hands shaking.
You'll regret this, Scott. I'll rot in hell before I let you, or that brat touch a cent of my sister's money.
They dragged him outside, past the stunned villagers, into the blinding afternoon sun. The wake had shattered. The truth was in chains. They locked Luis in the adobe jailhouse that night, a single oil lamp casting sharp shadows across his face.
I have your diary and oil can. Luis, your own hand condemns you.
Luis grabbed the bars, his breath ragged. Then, like a dam breaking, he began to speak.
I filed the lantern pins. I wanted the oil to pour slowly, so the fire would look like an accident. I stood outside and listened. I heard them screaming, and I felt nothing. Just the money. That fortune should have been mine. My sister never deserved it. That child certainly didn't.
You would have burned my daughter alive for money.
I didn't count on the horse. That cursed gelding destroyed everything.
Sheriff Moreno slid a pen across the stool. Luis signed the confession, his hand trembling. The cell door clanged shut. Scott stood alone in the corridor, the ink still wet. The war for Elena's inheritance had only just begun. By morning, the confession had poured through the village like hot tar. Scott stood in the plaza, Susan clutching his arm, as a black-suited judge stepped from a hired motor car. The judge wasted no time. With Luis accused, the probate court would freeze all of Maria's assets pending trial. The house, the land, everything Elena would inherit would be locked away.
They can't freeze her inheritance. We have his signed confession.
A sharp young woman in a pressed suit cut through the crowd. Valeria Ortiz, a lawyer from the capital, had followed the case in the newspapers.
I've handled inheritance disputes before. Let me look at the original will. There may be a way.
In a back room, Valeria spread the yellowed will across a table. Her finger stopped on a small paragraph near the end, a clause added by an old notary, overlooked by everyone. If the named beneficiary is targeted by a criminal act, any inheritance transfers shall be null and void. The estate shall remain with the victim upon conviction of the assailant.
Then, if he's convicted, Elena keeps everything. She'll be safe.
Then we fight. We hold on until the trial.
The legal war was far from over, but now they had a shield. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, and somewhere on the farm, Elena laughed. The trial opened under the heavy wooden beams of the Sonoran courthouse. A dozen jurors stared at the man in chains. Luis Herrera, his tailored suit now rumpled, his eyes flat as river stones. Scott was called first. He climbed into the witness box, his palms slick, and swore to tell the truth. But Luis's attorney, a slick capital lawyer, didn't ask about the fire. He asked about loans, about overdue notes, about how Scott stood to gain from the chapel's total destruction. The lawyer leaned in. Mr. Scott, isn't it true you owed 3 months' rent on the chapel hall? That the fire wiped your debts clean?
That fire almost killed my daughter. No debt could make a father do that.
Susan was called next. Her voice trembled, but held as she described the pantry, the cold threat Luis had made against Elena's inheritance.
He said, "If you destroy my good name, I'll make sure the inheritance is tied up for years." He was threatening a child.
The defense leaped up, shouting hearsay. Valeria was already on her feet, voice cutting through the din.
The threat is relevant to motive, Your Honor. The defendant's own words to the victim's mother.
The judge sustained. The jury leaned forward as Scott took the stand again, his face bruised by the ordeal but unbroken. The real battle had just begun. The prosecution called the boy who had seen the man at the lantern. He was small in the witness box, but his voice carried. He raised a shaking finger and pointed directly at Luis. "That's him," he whispered. A handwriting expert took the stand, holding the leather diary. "This is Luis Herrera's script. No question." The courtroom stirred.
You wrote those words. You planned every detail.
A cantina worker testified that Luis did not enter the cantina until long after the fire. His candle-lighting alibi was a lie. The defense's closing argument was brief and desperate. Valeria Ortiz rose for the prosecution.
Luis Herrera loosened a lantern to burn a child alive for money. His diary confesses it. His own mouth confesses it. I ask for justice.
The judge charged the jury. 12 citizens filed out of the room, their faces unreadable as stone. Scott and Susan waited on the courthouse steps, the desert sun sinking low. Somewhere, Elena laughed, innocent of the fight for her life. Inside, the jury began its deliberation. Everything hinged on 12 hearts in a dusty courtroom. The jury returned before the sun had moved 2 degrees. The foreman, a widower with a steady gaze, unfolded the paper. On the charge of attempted murder, we find the defendant, Luis Herrera, guilty. Luis closed his eyes. A single tear traced the dust on his cheek, and his shoulders sagged. The judge's voice was ice. 25 years of hard labor. May God have mercy on your soul. Valeria Ortiz did not celebrate. She rode to the probate court and laid the conviction order beside the original will. The judge examined the protective clause. The inheritance of Elena Maria Reyes shall remain intact and inviolate. By dusk, Scott had lifted Elena onto his shoulders in the town square. Her laughter mingled with the deep bells of the church.
She'll never have to fight for what's hers again.
We did it. We really did it.
The desert sky turned gold and crimson. The chapel ruins stood in shadow, but the family stood whole, and the future was finally their own. The morning after the celebration, Father Miguel rang the cracked bell. The village gathered among the still smoking timbers.
Justice has been served. Now we must rebuild this sacred place with our own hands.
And we should remember the miracle. Let us carve a relief, the horse, the child in the cloth, above the new altar.
A wooden box was set beside the ruins. Coins clattered into it, pesos and reales, the savings of farmers and widows. The old woodcarver of the village stepped forward, his hands trembling as he unrolled a parchment. There, in fine ink, Bravo mid-stride, mane streaming, the white bundle glowing against the flames.
That's it. That's the moment he came through the fire.
Our Bravo will be remembered forever.
Father Miguel made the sign of the cross over the sketch. The carver kissed his chisel and set to work that very night. The first stones were lifted. The chapel began to rise again from its own ashes. The new chapel doors opened for the first time. The villagers pressed inside, their whispers rising to the rafters.
By water and the Holy Spirit, we consecrate this house and the memory it holds.
Two men lifted the white cloth. It fell away like a shroud. Sunlight struck the carved wood. Bravo's mane lifted in the wind, the bundle wrapped protectively across his back. The horse's carved eye, deep and dark, caught the light as if alive. A collective gasp rose. Some wept openly. Susan pressed a handkerchief to her mouth.
That's my brother. Bravo is my brother.
Yes, mi amor. He will always be your brother.
Father Miguel bowed his head before the carving. The chapel, restored from its own death, held its first miracle in wood and light. Outside, the bell began to ring, a clear, new peal calling the valley to peace. The story of the horse, who walked through fire, traveled across Sonora. Strangers came just to touch his mane. On Elena's 5th birthday, she unwrapped a small wooden horse, carved by the same hands that shaped the chapel's relief. Then she sprinted to the stable.
Happy birthday, Hermano.
Neighbors told the story to anyone who would listen. That's the horse who carried the child through the flames. Scott taught Elena to ride, leading Bravo by the bridle while she gripped his mane with both small fists.
This is where I belong, with my brother.
She would brush his coat for hours after school, telling him secrets no one else could hear.
I'll always be your sister, Bravo. Always.
And the horse who had once charged into hell stood still and let the wind comb his mane. A child's laughter wrapped around him. Bravo's 27th winter was his last. The vet left his bag in the cart and shook his head. That evening, Elena, now 17, carried a heavy blanket into the stall and settled beside him.
You found me in the fire. I'll sit with you in the cold.
She sang an old lullaby her mother had taught her, and Bravo's breathing slowed. At first light, his great heart gave out. The stall filled with the soft scent of hay and a profound stillness. Scott dug the grave beneath the mesquite where Elena had been treated so many years ago. The whole village came. The blacksmith, the shopkeeper, Father Miguel, all who remembered the fire.
Goodbye, Hermano. Sleep where the flowers grow.
Scott placed a wooden cross, carved with his own hands, bearing Bravo's name and the word Salvador. The horse who ran into fire had not been forgotten. He would never be. Elena walked to Bravo's grave as the sun sank low, touching the carved cross with her fingertips.
I'll always come back, Hermano.
She pushed open the chapel doors. The carving of Bravo hovered above, dark against the last light. She lit a candle beneath the carved horse, the small flame pushing back the shadows.
He gave me breath. The least I can give him is memory. I'll tell my children about you, Bravo. They'll know your name, your courage, your fire.
The candle flame steadied. In the carved wood, the horse's dark eye seemed to shimmer, catching the light.
You are still here. I can feel you.
She rose and pressed her hand to the wooden muzzle. Thank you, she whispered. Outside, the desert wind stirred the mesquite. The chapel bell tolled once, and Elena walked home beneath a sky of gold. Decades folded into the desert soil. Scott and Susan grew old on the porch, their hands intertwined, their eyes on the chapel bell tower.
Do you ever stop hearing the fire?
Number. But I hear the horse's hooves louder.
The chapel below grew into a place of pilgrimage. Travelers left candles and prayers beneath the carved relief. Elena, a mother now, brought her own children to the chapel. She lifted them to touch the wooden muzzle.
This is your Uncle Bravo. He saved me from the fire.
The carved horse's eye, polished by 1,000 touches, seemed to watch over them with ancient, silent grace. Father Miguel, now stooped and silver, still climbed the bell tower each Sunday. The notes carried the story across the valley, and on the porch, Scott closed his eyes. Susan's breathing was the only music he needed now. The fire was distant, the horse was forever. Years later, an old woman with silver hair sat on a stone bench beneath the chapel's shade. A circle of village children gathered at her feet.
I was 2 years old when a horse carried me from a burning chapel.
She pointed to the carved wooden relief above the chapel door. The horse mid-stride, the white bundle glowing.
His name was Bravo. He was my brother.
She told them of the wedding, the lantern, and the forgotten child behind the altar, of smoke and screaming and a rope that snapped.
He ran into the fire when no one else could. Because he was brave, I am here today.
Her trembling finger traced the carved wood. The horse's eye, polished by 100 years of touch, seemed to shimmer. The children stared up at the horse. Not just a carving, but a brother who had never really left. And the story did not end. It was woven into the valley, like the roots of the mesquite, the horse who ran into a burning chapel and brought back a child wrapped in white. The desert wind carried the last bell note across the valley. Sunset bled orange and purple into the adobe walls. Inside, the candles guttered low. The carved horse's eye caught the final light, deep and knowing. The white bundle in the wood seemed almost to glow, a frozen moment of rescue. Older than memory now, at the edge of the pasture, the wooden cross still stood. Wildflowers bloomed around it, renewed each spring.
I will join you soon, Hermano, but the story will still be told.
The chapel doors stood open. Dust devils danced in the fading light, and the valley lay utterly still. The sun slipped below the mountains. The carving became a dark silhouette against the ember sky. He had run into fire for a child he did not know, and in doing so had saved a whole family's heart. As long as the desert wind blew and the chapel bell rang, his name would be spoken. Bravo, Salvador, brother. And the little chapel, rebuilt from its own death, stood through the night, holding a miracle in wood and a promise in stone. Dawn crept over the chapel walls, and the first light touched the carved eye. The bell tower stood silent, but the valley remembered. Wildflowers had claimed the wooden cross. Their petals held the morning dew like tears. The pasture lay empty of horses, but not of memory. The carved relief above the door caught the rising sun, the horse and child frozen in their eternal flight from the flames. A single lantern still burned inside, set by no one and left for everyone. In the stillness, the story was not a story anymore. It was stone and wood and light. It was the air the valley breathed. The sun climbed higher. The carving's witness would outlast every living soul in that village. But the horse had never needed to be immortal. He had only needed to be brave for 30 seconds, and that had been enough. And so the little chapel at the edge of the Sonoran Desert remained, not a monument to tragedy, but a house of rescue. Inside, the carving still held its silent promise. A child saved, a brother remembered, a fire that could never burn again.